today at 6, a backlash from landlords after Boris Johnson says a vaccination passport might be needed to get into a pub. He says that could happen once all adults have had the jab, but with pubs desperate to open, it's the last thing they want.
I think it will drive people away from local hospitality venues and even city centre ones, where what we need to be doing is bringing people back in.
And in the last hour, MPs have voted to extend the government's lockdown powers in England, also tonight. Zoom summit for EU leaders. They're under pressure to increase vaccine supplies. Where does that leave exports to Britain? An apology to parents after a teacher shows cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad at a West Yorkshire school. Get ready for the new normal. Nationwide tells thousands of staff they can choose where to work once the pandemic is over. Delayed but not dimmed, the Olympic torch relay gets underway from Japan's frozen north to its tropical south.
And coming up on BBC News, after making the semi-finals in Russia, Gareth Southgate and his England side get their World Cup campaign for Qatar 2022 underway against San Marino.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. MPs have voted to extend till the autumn the government's power in England to impose COVID restrictions. That's months after we're all supposed to have returned to something like normal life. The debate has raised questions about what kinds of restrictions we should tolerate, none more so than Boris Johnson's suggestion that you might need a vaccine passport to go for a pint in the pub. He did say it couldn't happen till all adults have had the jab, but there's still been a backlash from the hospitality industry. Here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Eager to get to the bar? Forget proving age. What about proving you've had a jab or a negative test to get a pint? The Bell and Costner Stourbridge has already spent thousands to get ready to serve outside.
I just think it's a really, really bad idea. The checks we had to do anyway when we were open were extensive. It created a huge amount of extra work, which meant an extra increase in the staff costs. Also the stress of the staff, because we were meticulous in following these instructions. Where are we doing it?
Boris Johnson paints himself a freedom lover, but regular COVID checks are being considered as the government wrestles with how to safely open the economy. It's not easy to grab on to straightforward solutions.
You need to get a haircut.
Anyway, are you booked in for April the 12th?
For the pub, yes.
For the haircut!
Whether haircuts or this issue, pub passports, there's a lot to plan.
You've got to be careful about how you do this. And you might need to, you might only be able to implement a thoroughgoing vaccination passport scheme, even if you wanted such a thing, in the context of, when absolutely everybody has been offered a vaccine. So, there are complexities, moral complexities, ethical problems that need to be addressed.
Hang on though, this was only last month.
What I don't think we will have in this country is, as it were, vaccination passports to allow you to go to, say, the pub.
That view is shifting though. This is one of Downing Street's locals, and like everywhere else around the country, it hasn't seen a punter for months. The government isn't planning to make vaccines compulsory or force you to do a test every time you leave the house. But they are looking at how pubs, restaurants, venues, football grounds or workplaces could use COVID checks to help open up and let us back in. Officials are considering if pubs and venues could stop social distancing if they carried out COVID checks, but they'd leave the decision to do so up to individual firms.
It's not really for the government to abdicate its responsibility and leave it to the private sector to decide the rules and then take the flak for what may be very unpopular decisions.
With so many doors still shut, this suggestion's riled a small but noisy group of Tory MPs, already unhappy that ministers asked them to extend the government's sweeping powers.
Unless you fight for freedoms every day, they end up being taken away from you.
After months of denial, now indeed it will be the case that you will have to provide your vaccination bona fides when you go to the pub.
We, as Conservatives, should be very careful not to constrain the private sector in how they choose what customers they have.
COVID checks wouldn't be used until everyone has been offered a vaccine and won't affect grand plans to reopen outdoor venues next month. But as restrictions roll back, one thing is clear, the world won't look the same. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
As we've just heard, the earliest there could be any decision on vaccine passports, as they're sometimes called, will be April, when ministers review the situation. That hasn't stopped people in the hospitality industry from worrying about the implications. Our news correspondent, Sian Lloyd, reports now from Stratford-upon-Avon.
Serenaded in the sunshine and making the most of being able to meet another person in the open air. But at this nearby bar, it's the next steps towards opening up that are on the mind of publican Nick Robury. He finds the idea of policing a vaccine passport uncomfortable.
The headline idea is unpalatable because it's another restriction and something that could be ongoing. But if it's what it takes for us to run our business in a degree of normality successfully, in an enjoyable manner for our staff and our customers, I think it's something that we will have to accept.
It's only a short walk from Nick's bar to the town's world-famous theatre. Its doors have been closed now for a year. Keith and Sue are making their visits there. They say the idea of a vaccine passport would give them more confidence to take their seats back in the audience, but do have questions about how it would work.
It's just whether they're going to be doing these things electronically on smartphones, or are they going to be doing paper side of it. So it's just the logistics of it, really, of how they're going to do it.
Having a passport, if it means we can get back here, we can come back to our very regular visits.
Amelie and Ellie are both 17. They wonder how a passport certificate would affect them.
I'm willing to wait a lot more time for the theatres to open and wait for things to get better, to maybe implement more strategies to keep COVID safe than rush back into it and have another breakout happen, because we're in our third lockdown now.
If you can also maybe get in with proof of a negative COVID test. But I guess it's all just kind of trial to see what works best for everyone.
The streets at Stratford have never been quieter. People living here have had to get used to all the restrictions imposed. But now there's a new suggestion for them to digest.
At this confectioner's, fudge tastings and tours have been put on hold due to COVID, with only one customer allowed in the shop. But Grace says she wants to welcome everyone back, passport or not.
I don't think the passport's a good idea, because if people have got mental problems, underlying health issues, or they just don't want to have the jab, we've just got to accept that.
The town cinema would love to see customers again, but will it be with a COVID passport? Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Stratford-upon-Avon.
European Union leaders are holding a virtual meeting where they've been discussing their handling of the pandemic and how to increase supplies of the coronavirus vaccine. Among the options to consider are tougher export controls, which could affect the number of doses available in the UK. Our Europe editor, Katya Adler, joins us now from Brussels. Which way do you think the argument is run, Katya? Towards tougher controls?
Well, George, what I'm hearing is that it's unlikely that EU leaders will give the green light to those controls tonight. Now, the Commission says that they should. It says it's exported so many vaccines despite short supply here. One EU diplomat saying to me 20 million were sent to the UK since December, but that the EU is still waiting to receive one vaccine back from the UK in return. But, a lot of those EU leaders don't like...
Loading, loading.
Videos posted online show an angry protest this morning outside a school in Batley. Parents calling for the sacking of a teacher who used an image of the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, during a school lesson. By lunchtime, the teacher in question had been suspended, pending an independent formal investigation.
The school unequivocally apologises for using a totally inappropriate image in a recent religious studies lesson. It should not have been used. A member of staff has also relayed their most sincere apologies.
showing the image has offended the Muslim community. Any depictions of the Prophet Muhammad are strictly forbidden in Islam.
Batley Grammar School is in a town with a high number of Asian families. According to a 2015 Ofsted report, 3/4 of its pupils come from ethnic minorities. People I've spoken to outside the school say they're shocked by what's happened.
Overall, it's offensive. Whether it was, like I said, a family member, a friend, a teacher, it's offensive. The issue has been raised and flagged and dealt with. It should be laid to bed now.
It's quiet outside the school this evening, and community leaders here say, although they're deeply hurt by what happened, they will continue to work closely to resolve the issue. Shabnam Mahmood, BBC News, Batley.
The NHS in England is to spend an extra £95 million to improve maternity care. It follows the baby death scandal at the Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust that funding will help to provide an additional 1,000 midwives across the country. The move has been welcomed by bereaved parents as a step in the right direction. Here's our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan.
Baby Kate was just hours old when she died after mistakes at the Shrewsbury and Telford Trust in 2009. After 12 years of campaigning for better maternity care, the parents have welcomed today's investment.
There will be children alive in years to come that will be born perhaps in need of medical intervention, and that care hopefully will be there to prevent adverse outcomes or the avoidable death of the baby. So there will be children alive in years to come as a direct result of this money.
The Shrewsbury and Telford Trust is at the centre of the largest maternity inquiry in NHS history. Dozens of babies died or suffered avoidable harm. The care that more than 1,800 families received is being investigated. The new money builds on what's been learned already in an initial report published last year. £95 million will be invested in improving maternity safety. Up to 1,000 midwives will be hired, as well as around 80 obstetrics consultants. Some of the money will be used to allow them to train together.
Teams that train together will then work well together in emergency scenarios when they are all needed and rely upon one another in order to deliver safe care. And I think that this is very welcome.
Though maternity care is improving, in recent years scandals in Shropshire, Morecambe Bay, Ayrshire, East Kent and elsewhere have highlighted significant problems. Poor investigations when things go wrong, as well as a nationwide shortage of thousands of maternity staff, have been recurring problems.
Midwives have been telling us for a long time there's just not enough of them around to deliver safe and high quality care, but more importantly, women have been saying there's not enough midwives. And that is, it's really important that women are confident in the care that they have.
Richard and Rhiannon alongside Kaylee.
Loading, skipping, 30 seconds.
This money should mean fewer families suffer such crippling hurt. Michael Buchanan, BBC News.
And the time is just gone 6:15. Our top story this evening. A backlash from landlords after the Prime Minister says a vaccine passport might be needed to get into a pub. And coming up,
these are the hands that touch us first. Feel your head.
Words of the poet Michael Rosen, dedicated to the NHS workers who saved his life and thousands of others.
Coming up on Sports Day on BBC News, FIFA says Norway will not face disciplinary proceedings after players wore T-shirts with messages of support for Qatar migrant workers before their 2022 World Cup qualifier.
How often have you heard people ask the question, I wonder if we'll ever go back to normal? Well, the Nationwide Building Society has given us a hint that one lockdown legacy will be changes to the way we work. It seems many of us have liked working from home, and now the company has said that 13,000 staff can choose to work anywhere they like once the pandemic is over. Will it catch on? Our Consumer Affairs correspondent Coletta Smith reports.
Kelly's cracking on with work, but she's happy for a few welcome interruptions.
Hey Dave, how's your day?
Today she's heard
Loading, skipping, 12, skipping, 10. 10 seconds.
My eldest child started school back in September, and at the start of last year, before all this hit, I was worried about being the absent parent from the school gates and not being able to kind of be part of his school life. And actually, if anything, the pandemic's given me that flexibility to kind of block time out to do the school run in the morning.
But it's not been everyone's cup of tea. Isaac and 4 of his colleagues have now been...
Loading, 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 skipping, 15 seconds. Still
Firing,
loading.
camouflage it because, you know, your bed is only in the other room, so you can hang the phone up and just have a lie down.
Nationwide say they will give people a choice, but they're not worried that staff will slack off when they're not in the office.
Home workers are working, if anything, harder than they were in the office. Actually, the challenge of home working is making sure that people are looking after their own well-being, and we're doing enough to support people.
Most of the UK's millions of workers who are at home still haven't been told by their employers when or whether they'll be expected back to the office. So they'll remain working in front rooms, bedrooms, back rooms, offices right across the country. And for some, that's a joy, and for others, a real disappointment.
I live on my own, so it's a bit boring in the same house all day every day. You can't go out, you can't see your friends. Yeah, I feel like it's like the little tiny bit of a social life that I get.
Yeah, that's very true.
Because I feel like if I was stuck inside all day, I'll go insane. Like I'd go absolutely mad.
High street banking has changed beyond recognition, and today Santander announced they're closing more than 100 branches, with more staff dealing with calls and online queries from their front rooms. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Manchester.
Campaigners calling for compensation for people affected by contaminated blood transfusions in the 1970s and 80s have given a cautious welcome to government plans to review the matter. Up to 30,000 people were infected and thousands died as a result. It's been called the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history, and so far there's been no government compensation, just limited financial support. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
Jason Evans watches home videos to remember the father he barely knew. He was just 4 when his dad Jonathan died after being infected with HIV and hepatitis C as a result of treatment for his haemophilia. He's been campaigning to get the truth of what happened and for the government to pay compensation.
These are demonstrable losses that have occurred. People couldn't get life insurance. People lost their homes, they lost their careers. My own mum was sacked from her job based on the fact that it was known that my dad had AIDS. So there are real losses here that have occurred before we even talk about the emotional damage, the physical damage.
A public inquiry into what's been called the worst disaster in NHS history is underway. Inquiry staff have been trawling through hundreds of thousands of pages of official documents. At the hearings, those who'd lost loved ones were encouraged to leave notes in bottles. More than 3,000 people died after they were treated with contaminated blood products, some of which were imported using blood from paid donors, including prisoners. Victims and their families do get financial assistance, but campaigns say today marks a big change, with the government for the first time saying that compensation could be paid, depending on the outcome of the inquiry.
The government have never previously acknowledged liability for this. They've always paid this money on the basis that it was support payments rather than compensation. And so they've never actually acknowledged their liability and said that they were responsible for this. So just the word and the recognition that comes with that word compensation is hugely significant for our community.
The inquiry chair, Sir Brian Langstaff, had said that it was unfair that the UK's 4 nations were paying out different levels of financial support. Today he welcomed a new commitment to get those national schemes up to the same level. Claire Walton's husband Brian died with HIV and hepatitis C after being treated with contaminated blood products. Claire, who gave evidence at the inquiry, said today marks a step forward.
I was 23 years old when this started, and I was 60. Been turned from a wife into a carer, from a wife into a widow, and it would be good just to see the end, and that's what compensation means to me.
But families of those who died know there have been false dawns before. For certainty, they'll have to await the findings of the inquiry next year. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
2 pilots have been airlifted to hospital after a fighter jet crashed in a field in Cornwall. The Ministry of Defence said both pilots ejected safely before the plane went down near the town of Helston. It's thought engine failure was to blame, but there'll be an investigation. The Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, has said the government is looking at all options to make sure the UK's third largest steel maker, Liberty Steel, does not collapse. Concerns have grown for the company, which employs 5,000 people, after its main financial backer went into administration early this month. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
Rotherham, one of the 12 towns and cities around the UK facing a new crisis in the steel industry. They're all part of an industrial empire facing financial ruin.
Well, Rotherham's a steel town. It's recognised as a steel town.
Chris Williamson has worked there for 26 years, his father before him for 40. He explained what the impact would be on Rotherham if the plant closed.
It would be devastating. Rotherham would suffer vastly. What other jobs is they're going at the minute? What pay? But if we go to Wayside, the chains go as well. In the end, you just end up with a town full of shopkeepers and nobody to buy anything because they haven't got the income.
Down the road is Rotherham's sister plant in Stocksbridge. Tracy runs a cafe right outside the gates, and she counts generations of workers among her customers.
Right from the young apprentices, which is actually trained here, all the way through to the retirees that have worked here all their lives. It's actually the beating heart of the valley.
This crisis started a long way from Tracy's cafe. Sanjeev Gupta, once hailed the saviour of steel, was using tomorrow's money to pay today's bills by selling invoices due for future payment to a company run by this Australian sugarcane farmer turned banker, Lex Greensill, who would buy those invoices at a discount for ready cash. But Greensill went bust. Claims have since emerged that former Prime Minister and Greensill employee David Cameron personally lobbied the Chancellor on Greensill's behalf.
This is a sadly familiar story. Once again, a major UK steelmaker finds itself in big financial trouble. It's one-time saviour Sanjeev Gupta, who bought this plant and plants right across the UK, has essentially run out of cash. Remember, it was only 18 months ago the government had to intervene to keep British Steel going. Once again, it finds itself having to dust off plans to intervene in an industry it insists the UK still needs.
The UK will need plenty of steel for transport and energy projects, so beyond another rescue, what could longer-term government support look like?
That could mean supporting the industry through procurement, the same as the French government, through energy prices, the same as the German government do, but finding a way to help the industry to compete on a level playing field with other industries.
Liberty may yet succeed in finding a new backer, but cash is tight and it started asking customers to pay up front. The government insists it wants to buy more steel from British producers. Its first job may be keeping one of them in business. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Almost exactly a year since it was postponed, the Tokyo Olympic torch relay is underway. Over the next 4 months, the flame will make its way from the icy north of Japan to the subtropical islands in the far south, before arriving at the Tokyo Olympic Stadium on July the 23rd. Despite the pandemic and repeated scandals, it looks very much like the Tokyo Olympics will really happen. Here's Rupert Winkle-Hayes.
It's a moment many had predicted would never happen. But this morning in Fukushima, a year later than planned, the runners got underway. The Olympic torch relay has begun. For months, opinion polls have shown an overwhelming majority of Japanese are against holding these games this year. But as the torch relay entered the city of Iwaki today, a lot of people turned out, ignoring government advice not to gather in crowds, although they did heed the advice to clap rather than to cheer. When I watched the torch go by today, it became more real for me, this lady says. But I am glad they're not going to allow spectators from abroad. I'm going to be an Olympic volunteer, this student says, so I really want them to go ahead. When the whole world is down because of the pandemic, I think the Olympics will cheer people up. So the torch relay has now arrived in the little town of Futaba. And this town is one of them, was evacuated after the nuclear disaster at Fukushima Daiichi 10 years ago. In fact, the nuclear plant is just a few kilometres away from here. And despite all of the razzmatazz surrounding the torch relay here today, if you go just 100 metres in either direction, you'll find that this town is still completely deserted. And some of the people who come from this area are not hugely amused about the amount of money that's being spent on the Olympics when they still can't come home.
There are still plenty of other things that could go wrong, not least because Japan has barely started to vaccinate its population against COVID-19. But as the Olympic torch sets out today on its long journey towards Tokyo, for the first time in over a year, it really does feel like the Summer Olympics are going to happen. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Fukushima.
Let's get the latest now on the weather with Helen Willis. Hello.
George, hello there. Good evening. We saw some bright sunshine today between the showers, feeling a little spring-like, but it's all change for tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow, I think by the end of the day, it will turn colder for all of us with more showers, but we'll see the temperatures seesawing in the coming few days. So this is the distribution of the current showers, a little bit wintry over the tops, hail and thunder with some of the heavier ones as well. And we've also got some showers that have been pestering southern and eastern areas. In between, we've seen that sunshine. And that's what continues as we go through this evening. Lots of showers, and eventually they merge into a longer spell of rain in the north and the west, and that is the cold weather front. So behind it, later in the night, there'll be a dip in temperatures, but for most of us, with the clouds, the showers, the wind, temperatures will hold at 6 or 7 degrees. So we start with some brighter weather, some sunshine, southern east areas, some showers, but this is going to be a fairly significant band of rain, some heavier bursts for some of us, a couple of hours as well, and then behind it, the sun comes back out, we've got showers, but look, they're much more wintry looking tomorrow because it's colder air, and temperatures will be probably about 3 or 4 degrees down on those that we've had today. But it should be just a temporary brief chilly spell, at least warm for this week. So during tomorrow evening and overnight, look at the wintry weather, even in southern areas, over the hills, there could be a little bit of sleetiness around. And a much colder night tomorrow, widespread frost in the north and some rural frost in southern areas as well. That's our start of Saturday with a little ridge of high pressure. Saturday promises to be the drier day of the weekend, but Saturday night brings in wet and windy weather. There's uncertainty as how far south that weather front will come on Sunday. So if you are trying to make plans for when you're going to take your exercise over the weekend, please do stay tuned to the forecast. But Saturday looks like the drier day of the weekend, and it looks windy across the board. That's it for now. I'll hand you back to George.
Many thanks, Helen. Now, tonight marks 1 year since the first clap for Kings. To mark the moment, children's author Michael Rosen, who spent 7 weeks in intensive care last year, is sharing his poem about the NHS. It's illustrated by the artist Charlie Mackesy and includes the faces of frontline workers we've spoken to over the past year. Goodbye.
I'd like to read a poem about the NHS that expresses my feelings that I have for everybody who works in the NHS, for all the people who saved my life and saved the lives of thousands of others. These are the hands that touch us first, feel your head, find the pulse and make your bed. These are the hands that tap your back, test the skin, hold your arm, wheel the bin, change the bulb, fix the drip, pour the jug, replace your hip. These are the hands that fill the bath, mop the floor, flick the switch, soothe the sore, burn the swabs, give us a jab, throw out sharps, design the lab. And these are the hands that stop the leaks, empty the pan, wipe the pipes, carry the can, clamp the veins, make